Today we'll be continuing our study of Titus 2, 4, and 5's instructions that we love our husbands. In particular, today we'll be examining kindness, an important element in the definition of benevolence, which itself is the second part of the three-part definition of love. Hello, and welcome to Wisdom for Women, where we study the Word of God and the words of God, applying them practically to our daily lives, our habits, our decisions, our personalities, our work, our play, and our relationships. This is a gender-specific channel for women. 1 Timothy 2:12 says, "But I suffer not a woman to teach nor to usurp authority over the man, but to be in silence." At the same time, I'm commanded as an aged woman to teach the young women. In light of that, let me make it clear that if you are a man viewing this episode, you should know that my teaching is not directed toward you. Also, there may be men who wish to preview this channel to make sure it's appropriate for a wife or daughter, and I do not want to prevent that godly oversight on their part. Today and every day, I'll be reading from the centuries-old Authorized King James Bible, the perfectly preserved English translation of the very words of God, and we will together study to show ourselves approved, workwomen who need not be ashamed, as we rightly divide the word of truth. Let's get right into our scripture. Titus 2, 4, and 5, that they may teach the young women to be sober, to love their husbands, to love their children, to be discreet, chaste, keepers at home, good, obedient to their own husbands, that the word of God be not blasphemed. As mentioned before, we know from Webster's, love between the sexes is a compound affection consisting of esteem, benevolence, and animal desire. We discussed esteem in 4 episodes earlier, and the last 2 episodes have begun to study benevolence, and specifically charitableness, as part of the definition of benevolence. I encourage you to go to my channel where you can easily access each of these episodes in the specific playlists for each topic. Let's recap that definition of benevolence. Webster's defines benevolence as the disposition to do good, goodwill, kindness, charitableness, the love of mankind, accompanied with a desire to promote their happiness. Today we're moving on from charitableness and looking at kindness toward our husbands. Kindness, according to Webster, is goodwill, benevolence, that temper or disposition which delights in contributing to the happiness of others, which is exercised cheerfully in gratifying their wishes, supplying their wants, or alleviating their distresses. Interesting that kindness is used as a definition for benevolence, and benevolence is used as a definition for kindness. They apparently are interchangeable, but let's look a bit further in this definition. That temper or disposition which delights in contributing to the happiness of others, which is exercised cheerfully in gratifying their wishes, supplying their wants, or alleviating their distresses. So, to apply this to our husbands, kindness would be a temper or disposition, an inclination, tendency, or propensity that delights, that takes great pleasure in contributing to the happiness of our husbands, that cheerfully gratifies or satisfies their wishes, supplies their wants or lack, and alleviates or lessens their distresses, their pains, afflictions, and miseries. We're going to divide this into 2 main parts that Webster's gives in this definition, and let's explore them in relation to loving our particular husbands. First, kindness delights in contributing to the happiness of our husbands. It cheerfully gratifies or satisfies their wishes, and it supplies their wants. What makes your husband happy? What does he wish for? What does he feel that he lacks or wants? Do you even know? Have you ever asked him, or can you tell what he likes? We know from our esteem episodes that studying our particular husbands can help greatly in knowing what makes them happy, whether they are command men, visionaries, or steady men, whether they speak the love languages of words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, acts of service, or physical touch. These all help us narrow down what would make our own husbands happy. But sometimes their happiness, wishes, and wants go beyond just those umbrella categories. Sometimes unique husbands ask for something special, and if we refuse to provide this or simply don't listen, we fail to show them kindness and benevolence. I'm close friends with a woman who has been married for over 50 years. From the beginning of her marriage, her husband wanted her to grow her hair long. I know this. He made repeated requests, but this woman didn't think long hair would suit her face and thought her hair was unattractive long. So she refused and continued cutting her hair short. I hadn't seen my friend for a while, and then she came to visit a few months ago. I was delighted to see that her hair had grown out and was now touching her shoulders. I didn't specifically ask her about it, but I can only assume that nearly 50 years into the marriage, she finally decided to cheerfully gratify and satisfy the long-time wish of her husband. She made the right choice, at long last. But how much better would it have been if she had started growing out her hair the first time her husband made the request? 50 years of growing would have produced some amazingly beautiful long hair for him to enjoy. Maybe your husband has unique wishes and dreams like this, and your own opinions or pride want to stand in the way. Don't let them, women. Kindness to your husband means that you will cheerfully gratify and satisfy the wants and wishes of your man. Debbie Pearl, in her excellent book Created to be His Helpmeet, from which I have read before and which I'll link in the description below, shares a letter from a woman, Yolanda, who wrote to Debbie about a want, a wish, a dream of her husband. Let's read that and Debbie's comments on it together. Here's Yolanda's letter. She says, I've been married for 19 years, and my husband really is a great guy. He knows the Lord, but has not been as consistent with Bible reading as I'd like to see. I'm not saying anything to him about it yet. Our problems really stem from a change he made for our family that started about 3 years ago. When we married, he was studying to be a CPA. I helped him through the last year of his schooling and spent 15 years with him going through long hours of tax seasons. I didn't like it much, but I knew that it was his career. He wanted to find some job that would let him stay at home and be his own boss. I thought that was a noble cause, and I wanted him to be with our sons as they grew up. Well, what he has decided to do now, I can hardly handle. He decided to become a dairy farmer. We are city people. I told him all along I really didn't have a desire to be a dairy farmer. For 3 years, all he has done is read and research on it. I know he can make it work. It's just not something I want to do. I've had to cope with a lot. He still works in town and rushes home to go work in the barn. I had to wait dinner on him last night until 7 p.m., and then he rushes home and goes straight to the barn. I was really hurt. I'm tired of working and feeling as though we are getting nowhere. This is tearing the family apart. I know I must be submissive, but I truly do not want to do this. It is not my dream. There was no talk of farming 19 years ago. Yolanda. Debbie says, Yolanda's concept of marriage is all wrong, not at all like God's intention for marriage. God didn't create Adam and Eve at the same time and then tell them to work out some compromise on how they would each achieve their personal goals in a cooperative endeavor. He created Adam, gave him an occupation, appointed him as ruler of the planet, endowed him with a spiritual outlook, gave him commands, and specified his occupational duties. Adam commenced his rule of the planet before God created Eve to help him in his life's goals. Adam didn't need to get Eve's consent. God gave her to Adam to be his helper, not his partner. She was designed to serve, not to be served, to assist, not to veto his decisions. Talk about a change of occupation and habitation. Look at Eve. Can you imagine her saying something like this to Adam? When God brought me to you in that wonderful garden and we commenced life together, you never said anything about thorns and thistles, about pain in childbirth, about milking goats and churning butter. I am not a wilderness girl. I wonder if Yolanda's husband will quit his dream come true because she drops frequent reminders that 19 years ago he didn't tell her that someday he was going to be a dairy farmer. Will her unhappy, overworked expressions break his joy and rob him of his vision? If he does go back to being a full-time CPA, I wonder if he'll spend the rest of his life dreaming of a different kind of lady for a wife, a bunch of happy children, and a barn full of milk cows. Life is now. Don't make him ruin his life by being forced to count someone else's money. Find your life in his. Debbie later goes on, life is full of choices. How you choose to respond will help decide your fate in life. Life is now. Learn to really enjoy milking a cow. In the next chapter, Debbie returns to Yolanda's story and says Yolanda was sitting at home angry because her husband was late. When he finally arrived, he went directly to the barn to take care of the cows. She couldn't hold her tongue. She couldn't help the way she felt because she had spent the entire day, no, the entire week, month, last 3 years, thinking how miserable she was for the circumstances her husband had brought upon her. He has no right, she thought over and over again. This is not what we agreed to when we got married, she repeated to herself many times a day. He should come in and eat the supper that is already cold from waiting, not go out and milk those cows, she repeated to herself during those last 3 hours when it was obvious that he was late. She was storing up in her heart an abundance of selfish thoughts. Her actions and reactions became enslaved to her misguided thoughts. What could Yolanda do to change her thoughts? She could learn something she does not know from God's book, the Bible. She was not created to choose her husband's vocation, nor to choose his or her own lifestyle. She was created by God to be her husband's helper. In her case, that meant becoming a country girl, a dairyman's helper. She doesn't have to like cows, but she was created to help the man who does like cows. Think how different it would be if, when he were 3 hours late, she thought about how blessed she was to have a good man coming home to her at 7 in the evening with a paycheck, and to have love, security, a father for her children, a warm bed all night, and the promise of a bright future with more cows, better milking equipment, and hopefully a rise in milk prices. How thrilling life would be! How exciting and new every day would be! An adventure out in the country, not stagnating like the rest of the old fogies in town. Many a woman is sitting alone at 7 in the evening, afraid that her ex-husband might try to break in again, and she's wondering where she and the kids are going to move to next month when they are evicted from their duplex. She and many others would love to be in this lady's kitchen, waiting peacefully for her grassroots husband to come in late for supper, only to go out and tend his cows. When he did finally come through that door, his dinner would be warm, and the smiles and hugs would be warmer, with promises of an even warmer bed. Yolanda, in not adapting to her CPA husband's dairy farming dreams, had failed to love him, to show him benevolence, to show him kindness. She was not delighting in contributing to the happiness of her husband. She was not cheerfully gratifying or satisfying his wishes or supplying his wants. Instead, she had set herself in an adversarial relationship with him and his dreams, and was hurting both him and herself as she harbored bitterness and resentment in her own heart. I have another friend whose husband used to race stock cars before their marriage. After their marriage, she discouraged this as too expensive and foolhardy, an immature waste of time and money. This man still loves racing and wishes he could continue with his racing, which was his passion. But now he's quit because his wife wanted him to quit. He is a kind and steady man and doesn't want to arouse his wife's displeasure, so he has willingly given up this dream and desire. Yet when he visited us and enthusiastically talked about his old stock cars and engines with my own husband, I was able to see that his dream and desire are still alive and well. They've just been silenced and frustrated by his disapproving wife. Maybe my friend feels that she is in the right, but that feeling is probably hollow, knowing she has prevented her husband from doing something he loved, something that would have made him so happy, something he once even shared with her. I suggested to her when they were visiting that she encourage and support her husband's passion and not thwart his dreams, but we lost touch, and I don't know if she ever did. My friend's marriage illustrates another facet of contributing to our husband's happiness, showing our own joy and pleasure in them and what they do. If my friend had decided to support her husband's love of racing and be his biggest cheerleader at the track, she would have filled him with happiness and pride in his supportive, encouraging wife, which would have spilled out in his love and devotion toward her, making her happy. If she had shown approval and joy in the things that made him happy and contributed to it by urging him on to victory after victory, then their children would have grown up knowing that Daddy was the best stock car driver, and they would have been proud of him for it. The family would have been beautifully functional and functionally beautiful. But if not, her children are being raised knowing that Mommy is sensible and that Daddy sometimes makes foolish choices. We respect Mommy, but we suspect Daddy. Dysfunctional, out of order, simply because one woman wouldn't show kindness to her man by supporting and contributing to his happiness. It is a fact that when we are pleased with another person, that person is automatically more disposed to be pleased with us. When we are delighted in our husbands and what they are delighted in, then they will be much more disposed to be happy and delighted in us. Kindness on the part of my friend toward her stock car racing husband would have spilled out into her own life, strengthening and enhancing her own satisfaction and fulfillment as a woman. Kindness is never just a one-way street. It blesses the taker, our husband, and the giver, ourselves. And it reaches out and blesses both our children and the world around us. Debbie tells another tale of just this in a letter from a woman named Ruth, who writes, "Dear Mrs. Pearl, I know that joy comes from complete submission to God and to my husband. Does that mean I should not be frustrated and just plain tired? I have a question. Should one be quiet when you know your husband is making a poor decision? Doesn't being a helper mean that I need to help him make better decisions? Last week, my husband went to buy a new stove that we badly needed. He picked out a top-of-the-line stove and was willing to spend too much money in order to have the best. He called and asked me to go look at it and let him know what I thought. I shared my deep concern that it was simply too expensive. We do have the money, but I saw no need to buy the best, when the next scale down would do just as well. He called and told me he had canceled the order and bought the one I recommended. We both felt better with what I picked out. Should I have kept my mouth shut? I didn't tell him not to get it. I just thought it unwise to spend money unnecessarily. Do wives have to submit in everything? Ruth." Debbie replies thus, "Dear Sister Ruth, your husband's choice of stoves is a statement that he is trying to express his great appreciation of you and to please and delight you. Your countermanding his choice, even if it were a better choice, speaks to him about how little you value him, more than it does about how you value the dollar. You have forgotten the pleasure of having a man do something special for you. If you had been wise, gracious, and loving when your husband called to inform you of the stove he had in mind to buy, you would have laughed and been delighted with your husband's choice of stove. If you had viewed the extra expense as one would a gift of flowers, a wonderfully beautiful waste of money, and an extravagant gesture of devoted husbandly love, yours especially, but his life also, would have been richer and fuller for it. He would have been so delighted that you were pleased with what he had picked out for you. Something that simple could have changed your relationship into something wonderful. Every time you stood at the stove cooking, it would have reminded you of your husband's love. And whenever he saw you cooking on it, just imagine the deep satisfaction that he would always feel for having expressed himself so lavishly toward you. But now, every time you cook on the stove you picked out, you will feel your own wisdom and economy. He will remember your rejection and his foolishness, and the food will never taste as good." Ruth, in failing to allow her husband to please her with his generosity, deprived both herself and her husband of happiness and the fulfillment of his wishes and wants to do something special for her. My first friend, in refusing to grow her hair, had failed to show her husband benevolence, to show him kindness, to delight in contributing to his happiness, to cheerfully gratify and satisfy his wishes. Her own opinions on her face shape, her hair type, and her style selfishly guided her actions, rather than her husband's wishes and happiness. Thankfully, he will have his last remaining golden years to enjoy her now lengthening hair. It will never be what it could have been, but better late than never. My second friend, who would not allow her husband to enjoy his passion of stock car racing, also failed to show her man kindness, not only refusing to contribute to his happiness, but disallowing his own pursuit of that happiness. Are you getting the drift of what kindness to your own husband might look like? We are our husband's helps, specifically meet for them. Do you remember Webster's definitions of help and meet? Help means that which gives assistance, he or that which contributes to advance a purpose, a remedy, or relief. And meet means suitable, proper, qualified, convenient, adapted as to a use or purpose. Do you see that? We are to be adapted to our individual men. If your husband wants to be a dairy farmer, then you must adapt to that wish, that want. If your husband wants a wife with long hair, then you must adapt to that wish and grow your hair out as long as possible. If your husband loves stock car racing, then you must adapt and become a stock car racing enthusiast and your racing husband's biggest fan. If your husband wants to spend too much money on a stove for you, you must adapt your sensible, scrimping self to graciously and joyously accept an extravagant gift from him. Unless your husband is asking you to go against the law of the Lord or the law of the land, you have been created to adapt to his wants and wishes. Does your husband wish that you would dress in a certain way? Then if it's relatively modest, do this. And if it's not modest or fit to be seen in public, Then dress that way when it's just you and your husband and no one else. Does your husband wish that you would become involved in a certain project with him? Or, on the other hand, does he wish that you would get out of the way and let him handle it? Study your man and adapt accordingly. Does your husband like to fish or hunt? Then support him in this. Go with him if he wants you, and stay out of his way if he just needs decompression time on his own. If your husband wants steak every weekend, then finagle your budget to make it happen for him. If he likes camping out as a family, then even if you have a bad back and hate sleeping on the ground and cooking over a campfire, get over it and become his outdoor adventure companion. Find out what contributes to his unique happiness, what fulfills his wishes, and what supplies his wants, and adapt to do that for him. The second aspect of kindness is delighting in relieving our husband's distresses. Webster's defines distress as extreme pain, anguish of body or mind, affliction, calamity, misery. Many things can cause our husbands pain, anguish of body or mind, affliction, calamity, or misery. My own husband hates change. I, on the other hand, find most change exhilarating. If I follow my own inclinations without considering him, I will add to his distresses. I need to remember this as I clean the house, as I change furniture around, as I pay bills and make food, and 100 other things. Just the other day, we found ourselves with a lovely queen-sized mattress. I thought it would be a great upgrade for our queen-sized futon, which has a somewhat run-down, compressed old mattress. I suggested to my husband that we replace the old mattress with the new one. He didn't say no, but over the course of the next half hour, I could tell that something was bothering him. Finally, I asked him, "What is bugging you?" He responded, "I hate change." I was astonished. "Even when it's an upgrade?" I asked him. "Yes, even when it's an upgrade," he responded. I'm so glad I asked this aloud without just moving forward with my plan to change out things on the futon. It was the easiest thing in the world for me to alleviate his distress by dropping my idea of upgrading the futon, and I would have been adding to his distress by changing that old mattress to a new one. Maybe in another 30 years I'll be a kind enough wife to completely avoid any distress on his part by never even mentioning a possible change. But at least at this point I was prepared to backpedal on my idea, to alleviate any potentially distressing annoyance from his world. Now I realize that's a very tiny, shallow example, but there are big ways we can alleviate the distresses of our men as we go through life together. Are finances tight for you all, and does it upset your husband? Then what can you do to alleviate his distress? Can you sell some items on Facebook Marketplace to bring in a little extra cash? Can you economize more? Can you put off your own wants for a little or a lot longer? Can you repair the things you already have? Maybe your husband is distressed because he fears failure. This is a common fear for men. He could fear failure to provide adequately for the family, failure to measure up to his own standards or to your standards, fear of failure to maintain his reputation at work or in his community, fear of failing at a new venture he's trying, either at home or work, fear of failing your children or God, or just failing at being a man. Sometimes our husbands are their own worst enemies in this area. It is up to us, their wives, to alleviate their distresses in whatever ways we can. Words of encouragement, constant, unstinting support, loads of sex where we show our own pleasure and delight openly, unreserved admiration from us, belief that our husbands can overcome this obstacle, reassurances of our steadfastness and loyalty. All these and more will help to alleviate the distress of a man who fears failure. What if his distress is because of health issues, either his own or yours or another loved one's? How can you alleviate his distress? Can you physically ease his pain? Then do so. Can you offer optimism and stand strong beside him even in the face of a scary diagnosis? Can you support him and encourage him in his faith as he faces potentially distressing verdicts about his own life, your life, or the life of someone you love? Sometimes a man can be distressed because his contributions in your home or in the world are not recognized, and he feels this is unjust. Maybe someone else gets promoted when he deserved it more, or maybe he has been blamed unfairly and never publicly vindicated. You have the power as his wife to issue a different judgment than the world gives him. If your husband knows how much you value him, how proud you are of what he has done, and how much you personally look up to him and are honored to be his wife, then no matter what the world sees, or what his boss says, or what his accusers bring against him, he will know that you are his support, an ally, and the alleviator of his distresses. Other times, a man may be distressed because of the battle against sexual temptation. You, his wife, have the perfect solution for this, and you should apply this solution frequently, and with the greatest of love, skill, and a reassurance of your own happiness and pleasurable response to his advances and needs. Maybe your husband is fighting against other temptations, the lure of alcohol or drugs, an addiction to gambling or other addictions. You can help alleviate his distress by standing strong beside him against these things, encouraging him that you look up to him and will fight this battle by his side. Are there distresses in your husband's life that would be alleviated if you simply listened sympathetically to him? Cultivate an environment in your home in which he feels very free to share what's on his mind and in his heart. Our culture does not raise boys to share their feelings, and it will take an adoring, supportive, encouraging, faithful, kind wife to draw out the deep wells of emotion, frustration, and fear that might be distressing your husband. It will take you being a wife like the virtuous woman of Proverbs 31, whose husband's heart can safely trust in her. One distressing thought that seems to be universal to all men is the fear of being trapped in a marriage relationship, trapped with a woman who does not understand, sympathize, or value him, his ideas, or his happiness, and who seeks to control him. Solomon wrote of such a woman in Ecclesiastes 7:26, "And I find more bitter than death the woman whose heart is snares and nets, and her hands as bands. Whoso pleaseth God shall escape from her, but the sinner shall be taken by her." If you show kindness, that temper or disposition which delights in contributing to the happiness of others, which is exercised cheerfully in gratifying their wishes, supplying their wants, or alleviating their distresses toward your husband, he will never feel trapped in bitter snares and nets in his marriage, and he will never have reason to beg God to help him escape from you. Your kindness toward your husband will be the very opposite of bitter snares and traps. It will be your husband's freedom, peace, and confidence, just knowing he has a wife who delights in his happiness, fulfillment, and comfort. The virtuous woman of Proverbs 31 is the opposite of that woman in Ecclesiastes, whose heart is snares and nets, and whose hands are bands. Instead of laying traps for her husband, the virtuous woman openeth her mouth with wisdom, and in her tongue is the law of kindness. What does that mean? The law of kindness. Webster's defines this sort of law as that which governs or has a tendency to rule, that which has the power of controlling. So her tongue is ruled, is governed, is controlled by the desire to contribute to another's happiness, to supply his wants and wishes, and to alleviate his distresses. That is the controlling power that legislates all her speech. Can you imagine what a pleasure it must be for those around this woman to interact with her, knowing that when she opens her mouth, they will hear wisdom, and that wisdom, those words, will be governed by kindness. No wonder the heart of the husband of this woman doth safely trust in her. Okay, I hope you've gotten some ideas today about how you can aid your husband in his happiness, how you can supply his wants and wishes, and how you can lessen his distresses, and maybe how you can set up a governing law of kindness over your own speech. Let's each make it a point to show our husbands through our attitudes, our actions, and our speech the kindness and benevolence a husband deserves from the wife who loves him. Join me next time as we wrap up our discussion of benevolence and segue into a third facet of love between the sexes, animal desire.